It's the end of the day, isn't it? Right, let's see if we can find this. It's all interesting. So I'm a designer, and I lead a Design Informatics Centre at the University of Edinburgh, so across the College of Art, on the assumption that much of what we're discussing requires a design imperative. We seem to have won the award for largely male panels for today, and actually experience isn't, believe it or not, a gender thing, it's actually a cross. And people are having to need to understand how to design these interfaces, how to design these. And this is a young architectural student who started to record, this is 3 years ago, so on her iPhone, she just wanted to know how much data she was producing, how much she was passing on. And she just collected, she just printed out, and I'm sure you all know where the data is kept on these things, and she just started printing it out. And she printed out 800 pages in 10 days. And that's, I think, a fraction. That was way before Candy Crush, way before many of the contracts you just signed off and agreed terms and conditions to. So we have to accept that you're aware, we produce this data. And it's in that interesting space where there's a number of interesting opportunities, because that's really the market as we're revealing for the Internet of Things. This is Thorsten Hagerstrand, who's a geographer from the 1970s. And really it just sets up a condition of where we might be trying to find markets. What Thorsten did was very simple. He started to put time and space together to build time geography vessels, and it allowed them to reveal things they didn't know. In this little relationship here, you have a family, and through traditional ethnography, anthropology, you hung around with partners, but you didn't really manage to see the differences in their agenda or control of time and space. So by looking at a track of the mother, and the mum leaves proportionately way earlier than the father. I don't know how long he's in bed for, but she's up very early, takes the child to school, up to mother's job, does some shopping at lunchtime, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, father comes along and seems to nip out to the bike shed, nip into work for an hour, and then home. And why I use it is because this mining of data and looking for correlations, looking for patterns, has been happening for a long time. But what it's revealed is some of the socio tensions that you have, and finding out that in that particular family, the mother was acutely unaware of what her partner was doing. Now, whether you want to reveal what you're doing now at any point is probably going to be revealed. I think there's a certain idea that somehow the data will remain private and in our spaces. It won't. You know it's been leaked. You've seen the Apple, the iCloud got hacked at Christmas, Snapchat let everything go. So you have to assume that unless you associate with a blockchain and keep it somewhere, it's going to be out, and it's going to upset some of your relationships. You've also been talking today, and I'll just scamper through these slides, is this move from push to pull. And we know that we've had a 20th century, and you see it every weekend. You go around Asda or Marks and Spencer, wherever you go, and that's the end of that push economy. The 20th century model where you're literally, I mean, Kellogg's do very well out of us, don't they? They managed to make a pretty good average cornflake, and it's been the same for how long? And they've replicated that on how big a scale? And they just push it to some supermarkets, and we go along and buy the damn stuff. We'll buy it 24 hours a day, we'll order it, sometimes we'll pay for it to be delivered to our doors. But nevertheless, that end of that push is astonishing. And you know that many of you are connected to the beginnings of what's described as a pull economy, where we're beginning to start setting up some of the parameters, be it Airbnb, be it Uber. We're beginning to see some level of disruption. I wouldn't entirely say they're on the retreat, because I don't really see Kellogg's on the run. But you do begin to see on the back of Kellogg's packets a bunch of different games where they are starting to involve different markets and play different ways to capture data to better understand how they can perhaps build recipes for us, or so on and so forth. What I like as a designer is that this area here, the pull just doesn't do what the push does. In our office on a Monday morning, I collect Game of Thrones, Mad Men, a whole bunch of things. So I don't push those. What we do is we steal them, we borrow them, we lend them. I don't ask for some things back. If I lend you a book, I'm not entirely sure if I expect it back, but you might feel some entitlement. But what we do down here has ripped apart many of those economies which were pushed, which you've seen through Napster and many of those old stories. So I'm particularly interested in what happens in this space. Because there is an assumption that while IoT could offer a whole load of new horizontals rather than the vertical markets, we also seem to have a vocabulary around money and monetization which we associate with dollars and bank accounts, and it just won't be like that. Data doesn't do that. And a whole bunch of probably highly illicit practices. Of course, most of the push economy was based on a value chain where you had cornflakes made something over here, and they pushed it and they sell the ass out of it, and eventually deliver it, and actually I'm not entirely sure they do support it. Perhaps there's a regulatory manner that says that, or model that says that cornflakes are going to stay good for us. Now I'm worried about this because I think there's a number of problems for designers. Designers tend to get hired and fired in this relationship. So I'm quite interested in the market and how you as developers think you might be hired and fired. Increasingly, chances are you won't be part of a value chain, you'll be part of a value constellation. And everything in your house will be part of a value constellation. And these are these horizontals that people are inferring today, that whilst I've got a teapot and a kettle next to my Nescafe, next to my sugar, and none of them know they coexist. None of them do. I might have bought one from the corner shop, one from Sainsbury's, and one might have been a gift. None of them know about their existence. And yet, if you can find that missing horizontal, you can begin to suggest, no, you don't want me with, you want extra sugar, you want extra cream with me or something. So this is this fascinating space where in the constellations, we're going to find interactions with things way, way more demanding. So what do we do? Well, I work on a number of research projects, particularly ones that try and challenge that end of the push market. And if you get on some steps this weekend at Waitrose, you'll see it. And it's astonishing that we're still quite happily putting up with it to some extent. This is this little, what we call contextual archetypes then. So these are where potentially you guys might be wanting to make money, or certainly people like Tesco are looking for the horizontals in what my family buy. So they're looking at the, as we happen to have a toaster there, they're looking at the maple syrup from my daughter and the skim milk there, and what's in there, and so on and so forth. And I haven't got a nest, but no doubt if Tesco sell enough data to Google, they'll find out exactly what I'm eating as well as what I'm plugging in. We call those things contextual archetypes because actually all of us probably make a hot drink. Most of us do go to bed of an evening. Most of us do go into a toilet and we do the same things. And this is where these are beginning to be marketplaces because that's where you can find horizontals. So we've had some fun. We worked with the University of Warwick on a project called Hub of All Things, really trying to look at the privacy models. What happens when you do give people data and you ask them to think about who they want to pass it back to? Do they want to sell it to someone else or pass it to a neighbour? What's in the interest if you make it? So we've done some, I'm sure, to your community, they probably look like low-level tech solutions, actually, and they are really. There's a bunch of pies and there's a bunch of 3D printed bespoke humidity sensors, and that's one of the RAs at the back of my broom cupboard, having to put a collar on the end of my meter, which would be a Nest device, of course, and then with some clever machine learning, we'll find out what I'm using when my kettle goes on, and I get my humidity, and I get my light, and I'm beginning to try and put 20 sensors in my house, quite a lot, really, proportionally to many, and this is an interesting one. This is a Wi-Fi PIR, passive infrared sensor, so it knows, and it has a temperature on board and humidity, and we stick it in the bathroom and it senses, and a red light comes on when you're on the loo, and then my daughter says, can it see me when I'm on the toilet? Now, that's a serious question for my daughter. She's only 9, she's trying to find out her body image. I kind of had to know that, but son who's 11 doesn't give a damn. He doesn't care what's on the toilet or not. But a 9-year-old girl says, can it see me? Yes, it can. It's an optical device. The question you then have to talk about with your daughter is, well, how good is its eyesight? It's not that good, to be honest. If a cat comes in, the light will go on. And if the wind blows the plant just here, it will go on. And by then, she's kind of ignored me. And she's happy to lock the door and have some privacy. Now, those questions are the places that you are all, if you're interested in Reddits and Beddits and a whole bunch of things, you will be having that impact on all those communities. If someone jumps into my bed while I'm on conference and it looks heavier, what do I do with that knowledge? Because I'll be in that family. So you've got a number of critical social questions that we began to ask ourselves because we've started to instrument homes. It's not obvious who owns data. It will get sent back to a Pi and up to a private cloud we have, and you get stunning data like this. Look at that. This is a dinner party. And I know that because the humidity went through the roof. Now, to be honest, the problem was, that's it. I mean, that's, if we're not careful, that's as good as it gets, really. And I don't need to know that. Now, arguably, I could be sold material off that. If I sign up and lease this data to some people, I could be sold data back. But then we started looking into some of these more interesting social things, because I wasn't actually interested in that. We had a Withings device, and it's got these Withings scales. You might have these at home. And if you jump on it, and I'm about 72, it recognises me. My wife's about 71, fluctuates 70. So periodically, the scales will say, Chris, is that you? And I have to stand on the right and make sure it logs me. Or I could stand on the left and screw it up. And her profile will technically at mine. But that's what we do. This is what humans do. Don't underestimate that all of your community operate like you do. They really don't. This is the mail that comes back. So, sorry, this is the information that comes back to my iOS device. And I watch it and I look at the family. And I can see, I can get into Chris and there's Steph, my wife, Mary, and Eric. I have got an unknown measure as well. Someone's gone into my bathroom and stood on my scales. The amazing thing is, I thought it was one of Mary's friends, because 22 kilos is about Mary when she was sort of 7 or 8. But it's at, what's that, 20 to 11 at night. That's a big cat. So you're beginning, so whilst you can have this positivist assumption that you can gather data, I guarantee you're going to get a lot of anomalies, and you're also going to get a lot of disruption that's going to affect people also turning off the Internet of Things. The two kids, there's 11 and 9 now, and I haven't smelt their nappies for years, and it's been a wonderful pleasure. Do you remember that, the smell of nappies? And I have to work quite hard because I've cognitively dumped all of that. Well, now I'm beginning to smell behind doors, because I'm beginning to see when the PIR sensors go off. I'm beginning to know when the energy goes off, and I'm not sure I needed to know when my kids wee and poo. I have no idea. Does anyone know when you go to the toilet? Does anyone know? Because you think you're shutting that lock. I mean, we don't have many locks in houses. So as artist designers, we're very interested in this, because actually I think it's an exposition of what you're really starting to do. Enter highly private personal routines. Very disruptive. And the toilet's a great one, because you do think you've got a lock on the door. But of course you haven't, because the data's pouring out. So we developed an Internet of Things toilet roll holder. As you do, don't you? And this is the data it throws back. And I've got it live. I can show you it live, but it's live, so I can show you. Ask me later, and I'll show you how much toilet roll I've got on my own toilet roll. It's in the downstairs toilet, so I've got a couple of toilets. And you can see up here, where you can see where the large drops in data are, can't you? So all it's doing, it's a light sensor that measures from the top when the toilet roll is full, and when it drops significantly, you use your imagination. If it drops a wee bit, well, funnily enough, it's a wee. So I'm beginning to know, and I'm beginning to do machine learning. We haven't ran this through machine learning, but we're beginning to find out exactly what my family are doing. And I know now when my kids wee and poo. And I don't need Watson to tell me. In fact, I could begin to find out when my kids are not washing their hands. But I kind of, on the other hand, I don't want to invade it. I've had 2 people now refuse the toilet, because I'm now obliged ethically to tell them, the downstairs loo, you see, it's online. And that's 2 people have said, do you mind if I use the upstairs one? I don't care. I'm sure it's a great experiment, Chris, but I'll use upstairs. Last summer, I mean, what's funny is the cats are also starting to kill things. That's springtime, so they're going through the fields. We've tried bells to stop them going at the field mice, but it's amazing. They come back with everything. But I've got a number of problems, because periodically I don't have kitchen rolls, so I'll use vast amounts of toilet paper to clean up the guts and then put it in the food bins and think, what do you do with this stuff? And now I've had to write a tweet, so the software engineers had to write a tweet message to tell me, Chris, was that a poo or was that cat? So we've got this whole poo cat thing going on. Now this is me all the time trying to wrestle with the type of stuff you're going to make. You might be extreme, but that's what artists and designers want to do. They want to take you to a very near future which will breach a whole bunch of social and personal routines. But we have moved into production. So we've got a production line of 5 now. And actually, they're as well as being comical, but they're actually quite interesting things. The primary objective of the project is also to ask me and ask the team, if I have my data and it's private, I don't think I do own it, because I'm not entirely sure. I mean, what do? Do I redact when my mum comes? How do you redact data there? What does she do? Put blue tack on the sensor? But still, it's not named to anybody. But but very quickly, people will know exactly, as you know, by correlation, what those people are. So by building these things, we're beginning to intervene and understand some quite critical questions, I think, which you guys are opening, which ask questions about markets. So now that, so this is what we do. We're trying to do things that you're doing, but also be acutely aware of the experimental. I think that's the privilege of being in the university. Back to my friend here who's been producing this data, and you have as well. Probably, in the last 10 minutes that I've been talking, you've probably written a PhD now. All of the room has been exhausting, and people talk about this exhaust in your pocket. And I don't know what you've signed up for. Do you know? And have you really spoken what you talked about? Did you throttle down your data? I doubt if many of you did, because as Simon says, we can't really be bothered, but because we think we're getting value. Now, of course, what it does is, it does build these opportunities such as Google now to start looking for what are described as using predictive analytics to tell us stories about ourselves. And if the sound works on here. This is a great movie from, short clip from Saatchi Company. This is probably feature phone technology. Let's see if it works. Oops. And what the promise is here, the better life, is that if you stay connected, she'll never take that away from her cheekbone. It'll offer her visions of the future. She doesn't actually know what she's saving. She's always slightly ahead of the action. But this is Google Now. This is this idea that just ahead of time, you have enough data, you can begin to place things into the world which will help you move forward, will help the people around you get out of trouble. Now, the interesting thing with this data is that, like many of us, and my worry about Google is, or my assumption about Google is, they're actually not that creative, because they're using certain lifestyle models to make efficient, to be honest. They're actually making it easier to drive cars, making it easier to run kettles, and then making it easier to do so, because those horizontals will reinforce actually a lifestyle that's unsustainable. So what I'm suggesting is that the machine learning tends to look for patterns to keep your lifestyles going. That's kind of the point, because it keeps you on the end of an incentive, on a carrot, that keeps things and keeps you happy. So we tend to get this. So what we started with another project is what happens, and we were worried about the wife. She's getting a rough deal here, but actually if she did turn off some of that tracking material, what actually happens is she's actually having an affair. It's okay. She's actually having it, but it's just off the grid. So one of the projects we're working with is particularly, yes, you can hope, you can find out the right type of data to sell it because you can machine learn certain lifestyle patterns. You can do that. Nest can probably find out when I'm on holiday for sure, when it's a weekday, when it's the weekend, probably find out when the kids are at home on the back. It'd probably do that stuff. What I don't know if it's very good at doing is finding what we as humans do, which is find curious workarounds. Because many of you do find workarounds. So we have a little project where we're starting to disrupt the assumption of what the Internet of Things is about and starting to suggest what happens when you will get all of this stuff. This is a movie we've commissioned by Superflux.
0700 GMT.
I'll just turn that down. So this chap here has been given a smart fork by his very dear grandchild, who's really worried about his calorie intake, but he's happened to be very devious because he just wants fish and chips. So what he's having to do here is great, he's now having to have 2 plates of food because this smart fork knows exactly what he's eating on one plate but hasn't the faintest idea what's happening in the other space. The same guy's got sleep, bed technology, and he's getting a hard time from his sons and daughters about going to bed on time. The guy's retired. What type of lifestyle do we actually want? So he's figured out a workaround again. And people will do this with all of your instruments. I guarantee what you think Google think you're doing won't be the case. So he's got a whole bed full of beds and he's going off to watch Netflix all night because he can. Meanwhile, he'll get a message from his daughter saying, "Oh, great night's sleep." So we've started to look at these ways around because this is this idea that by Gartner suggesting within 2 years' time a significant disruptive digital business will be launched that was conceived by a computer algorithm. And I say that because it's not a human. Because what we're doing, if we're not careful, we're using machine learning to find patterns in humans and lifestyles that we know, and actually it may well be the algorithms that find the new market spaces. That's where the new business is, in this machine stuff that we're not looking at. So the think tank project has this really interesting question for design. I work in a design school, and for years we've been heralding superstar designers. Philip Stark, Le Corbusier, a whole bunch of these superstar designers, and we still like that. We still worship Johnny Ive. A little bit Simon. A little bit you like to see what he's done. And they're at the top. Now, we've been quite canny recently. We've opened up the crowd, and we've started to ask the crowd what they value. And we've got crowdfunding, we've got Quirky. You might have seen Quirky, I'll show you a slide in a minute. Which is starting to say, well, actually, the crowd know best. But I guarantee there's way more things in this room who could ideate you than there are people. Think of all the things that you're going to hoping to strap onto the internet. All of those things will outweigh any ideation that human beings can do. This is Quirky. So 854 people work together collaboratively on Quirky.com to find that bendy thing. 854. If you do get all the power sockets online, wherever you are, how many how many sockets in Europe will tell you how to design a better four-way? I mean, potentially with the learning, they're going to come up with the stuff way beyond what you're being promised through machine learning about your existing lifestyles. So we've got this question which we approach to designers, that if you keep looking at machine learning and keep looking for regular patterns and not the anomalies, you're only going to perpetuate, one, the unsustainable lifestyle that we lead, and you're also going to fool people around their data. This doesn't know what it is. It hasn't the faintest. And the principle behind machine learning is it enters my house. It gets put into a dark room, and it gets pulled out late at night. And it gets pulled out with two friends, a curvy one and quite a sharp one. And this keeps happening. And every night, late at night, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, they have a shower together. And within 3 weeks, it's figured out, I'm a fork. I think, therefore I am. I've figured out what I am. Because it's understood through all your correlations, all your machine learning, what it is. Now, periodically, though, it's quite happy in its identity. It's found itself. You can relax. It knows now. There's no identity crisis. But periodically, once every blue moon, somebody keeps doing something unfork-like with it. And it's quite confusing. And every so often, someone keeps opening paint tins with me. And now it's a screwdriver. Now, our question in Think Tank is particularly, if we don't know these things, if we lead it and move into a world of pure machine learning with Google and all of the push companies trying to find value in looking for patterns, we won't know about the screwdriver. We won't look in the dark. We'll only look for the commonalities. So what we've started doing is starting to kind of ask objects. We're playing an anthropological game. Is what happens if you ask objects who uses them and how they get used? Because they might tell us more about the humans than actually about themselves. So we bought some autographers, which are these kind of, normally you put them around your neck, and our anthropologists use them to work with communities to find out how you make cups of tea. And it captures every so often, it captures pictures every so often and so on and so forth. So we started, why don't we stop putting them on humans, because we know what humans do. Put them on things. So we put one on the fridge, one on a kettle and one on a cup. And it was kind of an arts experiment, really, but we're beginning to realise what we've got here, is the beginnings of another way of thinking through the data sets that you are all going to gather, but actually we're not going to worry about the humans all of the time. We're also going to worry about the other things. So at rest, we know that the kettle is still watching, and the kettle is actually watching the fridge. And you might begin to think, what's the machine-to-machine communication happening in that? We also find out that some people in the house are very obsessive about these teacups, and very obsessive. Other ones, and particularly the cup itself, flips around and it gets owned by a whole bunch of different people. So these are just beginning to give me the clues of how do we start asking questions about what it is to be an object, and how would an object begin to think, and how could an object begin to design. So we have car manufacturers, and I think the regulation comes next year, is it? When all new cars must have a 999 dial that says if they're in a crash, they will ring emergency services. So every new car next year will be on the internet, albeit under extreme medical circumstances, it'll use that. But no doubt that's the bandwidth. They'll just piggy that on the back of a whole bunch of services to keep looking for the efficiency of driving. And they'll take all that data, just like you would all your Internet of Things, and you'll look for how to streamline, how to make more and more economies. What the think tank project suggests is, no, look there, you're looking at 4 washing machines there. If you could ask all the objects what they could possibly do to correlate with each other, you could begin to design a whole bunch of different things, things that humans can't see anymore. You can only see a car. Ask the data, and ask the data different questions, and it will see a host of different opportunities. Ways are beginning to suggest that the push companies can actually collaborate and begin to build entirely different things. So we have this kind of, just to finish, a kind of a life cycle with usages and ideas popping out. Could objects prototype? Well, if they've got network 3D printers, why not? And wouldn't it be strange, instead of having predictive analytics with a Google now saying it's time to head for the station, wouldn't it be odd to wake up in the morning and have a 3D printer print you an object and you don't know what it's good for yet? But later in the day, someone says, then I've got a door jamb. Oh, no way. Stick it over there. So that's me, that's Think Tank. If you want more on Think Tank, I work in Design Informatics, but we've got a bunch of videos emerging on Think Tank, which is really trying to ask these very designly art questions about what do you do with the data. Thanks very much.